But you know, a lot of people will say, well, is this better or an SVJ? And I'll tell you this. Listen to this. That's insanely fast compared to an SVJ. It's just a different experience. And for that reason, I don't know that I'm sold on the idea that this is better than an SVJ. And here's a homosexual with a Corvette trying to race me. Like, why? Like why does this always happen? Why do people with Corvettes who have very small wallets feel the need to race another guy whose watch is worth 4 times his car? It's just so stupid, guys. Stop. Like, if you have a Tesla, we know you're a homosexual. If you have a Corvette, we know you don't have a brain and never learn how to make money. We understand these things as Lamborghini drivers. We don't need a reminder by you showing up next to us and making your car make a noise. It's as annoying as when a Civic comes next to your Corvette and tries to do that. We know that that guy doesn't own a home. We know he rents an apartment and lives paycheck to paycheck. And we know that about you too. We know that. So like, there is no need to feel like a Civic driver feels to you and how a Corvette driver feels to us, thinking that we're on the same playing field. You can never have enough watches, but my one watch is worth more, like by 3 times, than that Corvette that just passed me. And this idiot, for 2 seconds, felt the need to try to compete. You already lost, bro. You lost. And I hope you see this video so that that goes to your core and that you understand that you can't make up for the poverty by revving your engine. It just doesn't work. Anyways, back to our program. Oh boy, where do we start? The 2024-2025 Lamborghini Revuelto has been here for 3 weeks. Now, you guys have seen the unveiling video where I originally got this car. You saw me taking it home saying the first drive was amazing, and I have so much conflicting thought about this car. Would I spend my money on this car again if I had to do it all over again, and why or why not, and what does it really do for how much money it costs? So let's talk about how much money it costs first. This loaded car is 738 grand, and the most loaded cars can be almost 800 grand. The base starts around 600 grand. Now, I want you to know why this is really important. This isn't an SVJ. So a lot of people will say, well, the SVJ was 650 to 800K, what's the problem? This is a base Aventador replacement. So I want you to understand this. So like, this car in 2012 for the Aventador was a 400K car. This is now 150% more in base, plus the options, leaving it to almost 200% of the cost of a base Aventador. That's crazy. Then we're also faced with the fact that SF90 values have plummeted to 50 cents on the dollar, which doesn't excite a lot of people when saying, will the Revuelto face the same issue? And then, on top of that, according to some of my sources at Lamborghini, the first 1500 car had a ton of issues and a ton of recalls and a ton of campaigns, and in many cases had blown transmissions and issues with TPMS sensors, O2 sensors, infotainment systems, and all kinds of weird shit going on that just confuse people. So, how do we feel about an $800,000 base car that has issues? I want to start by talking about 3 key elements to this car, because I think the first one, obviously, is it's expensive for what it is, but maybe or maybe not, and we're going to get into why that may or may not make sense. Secondly, I want to talk about design, and I want to talk about design language, because I think it's really important to note I'm a big proponent of status and design in cars, and I think there's a lot to discuss here. And then I want to talk about the one thing we're all kind of like have mixed feelings on, and that's, how does it feel to be in this? Because an Aventador historically has always been a status car. Until the SVJ came along, it really wasn't a driver's car. And Lamborghini promised that this would be a driver's Aventador. And I think in some ways it's delivering, and we got to talk about that. But there's something that's really important, because I've said that this car right here, the last generation, the Countach, that was using a supercapacitor to help the transmission, not so much a hybrid system to make the car faster, is an SVJ on crack, or basically a Scion. And this has a lot of cues from the Scion. So it's really weird, because they introduced a Scion and took some of the stuff in here, and then introduced a Scion and reversed some of the stuff in here. So like, it's a really interesting clusterfuck, and both of these cars have their own spectacular things, and both of these cars have their own huge spectacular faults. But this one has way more than this one. And outside of the fact that this costs $3 million, which is clearly not worth $3 million, this does a lot of good things, because at that rate, the price of this is not that bad. So let's get into first design language, because I think it's really important. It's a really, really good looking car. And at first I was like, it's really not that good looking. And then I always said, and as I always said all over the internet, it's really about spec and how the car comes together to really see design. So you can't buy a base matte black car with no options and be like, I don't know if it's good looking. You gotta look at it as the most loaded, well put together variation of a car and say, does this car do these lines justice? So there's a couple of things I've noticed, because I'm very design OCD. The first one is that you need dark colored cars on large cars, meaning it's very hard to do like a bright yellow or something and really not steal the car's lines, because this is a strikingly, beautifully put together design. There are flaws in the design, and I'll show you on the front of it. My biggest flaw is that this piece right here has to be plastic. I think it's incredibly ugly, and it's in the center of the car. This should be a carbon option when everything else is offered in carbon. Secondly, I think this design around the headlights of this double thing, where this could be body colored, this is not, I believe this just isn't that exciting looking when you have this double design, and something up here should be offered as carbon, and it is not. Outside of that, I think it's a very good looking front. You have your cameras up front, you have your little radiators in the front, your design LED is absolutely beautiful. Look at this. Like, this is straight from the Scion, and it's beautiful. Like, it's really, imagine this coming behind you and you're like, what is this? Is this a spaceship? What is it? It's beautiful. And the other thing that I think we're just not talking about, the Aventador sitting position, you could barely see in front of the dash, and it had like a very weird large front thing going on when you're sitting in the car. In this case, you still get that gigantic dash, but the sitting position and the way the dash cluster looks, much more notice, like larger feel for the window and much more spacious looking, not so much crammed that I'm trying to see out the sides. A very, very good view on the road. And this is very important, and we're gonna talk about why. Because usually when you look at the back of an SVJ, you can barely see anything out of a tiny window. And here, from a design standpoint, you have this beautifully large window on the inside. This is huge. This is really, really big, and you just don't notice it until you're sitting in the car. Probably 2.5 times the size of the SVJ window. And because this is an open thing and you don't have this closed off, like kind of slatted rear like the Countach does, or like the Aventador SVJ does, you have this Bugatti-ish open back, you get the same kind of view. And the way the car is set up here, you really get a very clear and clean view on the outside. So you get good side views, you get good front view, and you get good back view. So that is spectacular and important. But now comes the best part of the design. This is amazing. One of the most exciting designs I have ever seen on any car from the back. You have a very proportionally exciting rear diffuser, all in carbon like art. You have these beautiful tailpipes with these gorgeous tips. Look at this. They're like in this weird shape, but they work so well, and you can see the dual quad exhaust here just looks amazing. The shields are black instead of chrome, so you get like this really sinister look without having this weird engine bay look. And you get to watch the engine here. Take a look at this, just completely exposed to the elements, and it's surrounded by beautiful carbon fiber. And I think that's something from a design standpoint that is just beautiful, even prettier than the Chiron in my opinion. Now here, you can see this Ford GT-like vibe. You can see this going on here through the holes. And look at this, because I have all these cars, so I have a lot of context. And you see, you have kind of the same feeling here going on, same thing, and they have it here on this car. Now, I will give you something. The side of it is really bizarre, and let's talk about why. Because in this side, if you're looking at it here or in a picture, so just to be clear, pictures do these cars zero justice, like zero. You don't, like, these cars look like crap in pictures. But when you look at it from the side, in a picture, it looks like a Corvette because it has this same kind of like weird shape thing going on here. But when you see it in person, you see how wide and crazy it is. It doesn't look anything like a Corvette. A Corvette looks like a piece of shit for like poor people that can't afford Ferraris. But in this particular section here, when you look at it in person, you have this gorgeous design that takes these carbon fins here and carries it on here into these vents. Very, very well done. Something you don't see. Look at these slats here. You see how they're protecting the radiator? And look at what they had before in the Countach and the SVJ. You didn't have this. You had these exposed radiators here. And because they were exposed here, you would get all the rocks. So they kind of fixed that so your radiators don't look like shit in the back, your coolers, whatever. So you have this like black cooler in the back so you don't see it. And on the old ones, you have all this chrome stuff so you'll see the damage. So they really thought out design. Even the door handles, look at how pretty, the little lock unlock button, the little form under to unlock it, and the door goes up so you still get the V12 and it's beautiful. Truly, truly beautiful. Like very, very well done. And the design language from the back, in my opinion, a full 10. The design language from the front, maybe an 8. And when we look at just the other thing, most manufacturers give you really ugly wheels and tires. So we have to constantly upgrade our wheels and tires, right? That's what we do. Beautifully done 21-22 set from the factory, fully adjustable suspension, slightly lowered here on factory springs, just coming down to make it OEM plus without needing spacers, without needing a new wheel, titanium bolts. I mean, they have gone to provide us a quality product down to even a carbon fiber hit here. This is beautiful, like truly takes all these little details. So design, if you ask me, it's really exciting to know that this is the baseline for what the new SVJ, the new race variation of this, will be built off of. And if you don't think that's exciting, think about how amazing Ferrari did taking the SF90 and designing the SF90 XX and the insane proportion of a race model versus a base car. And this is 10 times better looking than an SF90 to begin with. So design language, good job Lamborghini, amazing job actually in creating the craft and the basis for what is an incredibly exciting future for the V12 brand. So now let's go over here and talk about interior and talk about what makes this car complete dog shit. So everything on the outside, design is beautiful, but there are issues on the interior and significant issues. So first off, you can see I decided to go for an ad personam if you didn't catch the reveal video. This is a full ad personam Tiffany blue interior called Blue Glauco. I usually do my Lamborghini outsides in Blue Glauco. For the first time, I decided to do it all on the inside, including the headliner, all dry carbon options on the inside, all wet carbon options on the outside, so shiny carbon, and of course, this ad personam full Tiffany interior with the top of the dash black, so there's no reflection when you're driving. It's a perfect spec for the car. The paint is called Grigio Telesto, if you didn't know, which is an iconic color. I specifically wanted to do a pastel color that was on the darker side. This is why I went with a conventional Grigio Telesto, an expensive paint. I don't necessarily think Telesto is really a very rare paint anymore, but I think with this interior, it works flawlessly, so I was willing to take a chance. It has a hue of blue in the gray, that's why I did this. But let's go on the inside and take a look at this for a second. And we're gonna talk about design more than anything else, because when we drive, we'll talk about function. But my head does not hit, it's not uncomfortable. The seat is very much adjustable. You have place to put your phone. You got a lot of room. You got cup holders that are amazing, straight stolen out of a 2019 Porsche. So good job Porsche for owning Lamborghini and doing all this shit. And they used to charge us $5,000 for it. Now they don't. So thank you Lamborghini for that. I can have coffee in the car without having to put a cup on my nuts. So that's great. But there's a couple of faults. I don't know that they're significant because they're not in design, but rather in how design plays with function. And so instead of telling you all of the things that are wrong with it right here, right now, I want to give you the experience of driving with me so you can actually understand what happens from the moment you start the car to when you're driving the car and why this actually works or doesn't work. So I'm going to invite you in the car so we can go for a drive. But before we go for a drive, we're going to turn on the car here and understand what we have to deal with, because this is one of the biggest flaws this car specifically has. So come on in and let's go for a drive. So the first thing that's really awkward in this car is where the button placements are. When you turn on the car, you can pop the trunk with this button. It literally, you touch the screen and it'll pop the trunk. I don't know why, so that's problem one. I don't understand why that's there. Secondly, instead of having something like lift here, because lift would be something you would expect in a middle console or something independent, something that seems to be, whatever is here seems to be the command, right? So here you can put your key, so you have a place to put your key. But here is your actual fuel open button, which was really bizarre in your hazard. But this fuel open button you use once like every 2 weeks. It doesn't need to be here. You use your lift like a lot. But this button needs to be somewhere on the door or on the grill or somewhere. It's not an urgency to look at it, but somehow it's here for no reason, which is really weird. And what that does, to be clear, and I want to be really clear this, the reason that's an issue is because by putting the button here, you have to put all the other buttons here or here. And I'm going to tell you why this doesn't work. So I'm going to show you what happens when you get in the car and how or why this doesn't work. So when you get in the car, you obviously turn the car on like this. And as you can see, now it's in hybrid mode. And right now it's saying it's in park. And then when you hit it again, it now says it's ready. And you hear this little, the second zone LED opens. All these things come on telling you passenger airbag off, oil change due, this, measurement started, whatever. It's a clusterfuck of things going on for no reason. Then right now the car's on, so technically we could move forward. Now you accept this, so you know, now go into this interface, which I will give them credit. The interface now is much better than before in one way, in the sense that by actually going in the interface, you are able to press things and they typically work better, meaning it's still slow, but the actual touch of it is way better than before. And this is really important. It's much, much better than before. You can connect your phone, it typically works. And the issue is if you connect it in the wrong place, like you don't actually connect it to the smartphone and you connect it to the phone, the car doesn't automatically recognize that it's a smartphone. So you have to actually put it in the smartphone slot so you can get, you see, and now we're getting music, which is another problem. Now I want the music to go down, so I have to go like this, you know, and again, annoying, or I can shut the music. So you have one button and then another button, right? You also have buttons here for the music down, but it works really slow. And you have the other thing, which you can hit three, if it works, you can hit three buttons at once, like 3 fingers at once, and it'll just shut the music for a second. But we just discovered that thanks to YouTube, by the way. So whichever one of you fuckers actually told me this, that's amazing. I've been doing this shit wrong for like 1.5 years. But nonetheless, let's go back for a second here. So now that the car is on, I want the actual engine to turn on. And that's where it gets confusing. So you get in the car, you have to go through all these prompts to make sure your phone's connected properly. And if you want climate, you gotta go here and again start playing with this. Now, this could have easily been resolved with some knobs and some not, or some double screen or something. But let's just say we're here now, we're gonna off this, we have our Android Auto, we have this. The next step is to get the motor to turn on, because who wants to drive a quiet V12? So we go here, and now it puts us in Strata mode. Okay, now the car always runs with this only E mode possible to warm up the engine. So no problem, we have to wait. Once the car is actually warmed up, we can go to Sport, and then we can go to what we call Performance. So we can get the best variation of Sport or Corsa. The side gauges are completely useless, and there is a total of 3 modes on one side and 4 modes on the other side. So you have to play, so you go to Strata, you go to EV, where do you go, what happens, and then you select where you want to be, and every time you turn the car off, you have to go back and set these modes when you restart the car. So there's no way for me to tell the car that I want it to stay in Sport and I want it to go in Performance every time without hitting a knob 4 times. In my opinion, that's a significant problem. Like a significant problem, because that's just not, that's not okay. And a lot happens, right? So, okay, so that part's really annoying. Secondly, you have all of these buttons here. You have a blinker that goes on one side. You have an off button. You have a blinker that goes on another side. On top of that, you have your distance monitoring for your cruise control. You have your headlight, like just to blow someone up, you know, like getting like to move out the way because you're going too fast. You have this lift button here, which should technically be here, but instead you have these dampeners, soft, hard, whatever. And you have this awesome spoiler mode here as well, again on another knob, and then again an EV mode here with the EV mode and all the knobs for that. And then you have your wipers here, another wiper button, and a Bluetooth like talk to me button, and a view button that again changes the view on the dash. I complained about the Ford GT being one of the worst steering wheels in the fucking world because it's this giant thing with like a command center where you have to learn how to play a video game. And this is on the same level annoying and stupid. And it goes even further because it adds a whole bunch of buttons here for these two gauges here. So to drive this car, you have to basically be playing a video game at all time. When I'm driving and I'm like going fast and I want to merge, I have to really like get my hands to fit into these tiny buttons in between these four giant knobs. And that just doesn't really work well. Like it's just really difficult to like focus on driving instead of focusing on operating. So that's freaking awful. Like, I mean, it's fucking bad, right? But there's something that's even worse, and it's, well, the other part, it just pulled the check engine light. Why? I don't know. It has 200 miles on the clock. It shouldn't have a check engine light, and it does. But, and this is literally in this video that this thing came on. And then the last thing that I think is super important here, I think it just matters, and people are gonna have to pay attention to this. The radio in this car, like the music, once you're driving and are hitting the speed, is dog shit. I mean dog shit. Like the stereo is basically completely garbage. Like where I think a Kia with an upgraded sound system for like $800 is better than this car, which is terrible. Because if you're telling me that you've built this for the sake of being more usable and more daily drivable, more enjoyable, and you put all this fucking tech in it, in here, and it does all these things, well, you kind of fucked up the one thing people do every day on every fucking drive, which is to listen to music. Because the engine's so fucking loud because it's exposed back there. You can't hear dog shit, so you don't even have a good sound system. And people would say, well, that's not the point of an Mentor. And I agree with that, except that that's what they made it be in this particular case. They made it about being that, and then they took that away. The 812 GTS, which is a very flawed product from Ferrari, has an insanely good sound system with a full exhaust with no cats, full out exhaust, full fire splitting flames, top down, 80 miles on the highway, at 50% on the radio or on Bluetooth. I have perfect sound. In this car, at 100% of audio with the windows up, I have an average sound. So I don't know. In my opinion, for 800 grand, I don't think you should pay an extra $10,000 for a better sound system. I think you just need to have a good sound system. And that's basically it. So now let's actually go driving so we can see if this check engine light will prevent us from doing so or not in this review, and see what feels good or not about what works with this car. Ready? Let's go. Okay, so right here, I'm actually driving the car out of my office, right? And I'm going to take it to the shop where they're gonna see what's actually wrong with it. But here, when I'm getting in the car, just so you know, I have this short-term memory, long-term memory, and I have to actually click a button so my screen shows what I wanted to show instead of it automatically going there, even though that's what I selected last time. So constantly need to interact. But then listen to that. It actually sounds really, really good inside the car. It sounds amazing when you're driving. It doesn't sound that great when you're actually sitting there, and it doesn't sound that great when you're romping it like a aftermarket exhaust, but it sounds really good. And I've heard, just this is maybe fake news, but I've heard that Lamborghini will actually ban you from buying new cars if you alter the test pipes on this and give it a like flame shooting exhaust, because they don't want to see cars burning down. So just be careful if you're upgrading your cars. So as I drive again, you know, a very, very good sounding car. You hear the truck, like it's way better sounding than an Ultimate. I think it sounds amazing. So very, very exciting, running really, really well. And the view, again, I can't stress it enough. The view outside, spectacular. You can see everything, you can feel everything. The shifting, this is something that I think we don't talk about enough. You know, we complain about the clutchiness, the clunkiness of the single clutch transmission that the Countach had, even before the Countach, I should say the SVJ, the Aventador had, primarily because, you know, it was a single clutch transmission. They did a much better job in the SVJ. The Countach has a near flawless single clutch because of the hypercapacitor that just handles a transmission and does a beautiful job again. I actually really like the Countach transmission. I know other people don't, but I really, really do. I find it to be stunning, amazing, and really, really well ran. And here I'm feeling the same thing, and I think it's like, this is even better in the sense that it's faster, more responsive, like a dual clutch, because it is dual clutch. But I feel like the single clutch with the capacitor and the Countach was even better because it gave you that raw feeling, but it also didn't give you that slugginess in the shifts. It's not an SVJ, it's a better, much, much better Aventador. So again, you know, that's really my big issue with this particular car. It's that because it's trying to be a usable Aventador, it's taking significantly away from the driving. And for that reason, I'm not sure that it's necessary. I think they did such a beautiful job on design, and I'm so scared that, you know, the direction Lamborghini is going is to try to be everything to everyone. I actually like the fact that the Aventador wasn't for everyone. I like that people would say, that's a status car. It doesn't drive that well. It's sluggish. I liked it because it wasn't meant to be a driver's car. And it wasn't meant to be that. And that was okay for what it was. And it still worked really well. It was just badass. And I feel like this doesn't give me that same feeling. It makes me feel like I look like a badass, but and I perform like a badass, but I don't feel like a badass inside. And I think that is the whole idea behind driving cars these days. It's about finding out like what the experience of driving is like. And I think that this just doesn't do that good of a job at that anymore. I don't think, I want to feel like I'm enjoying the drive, but I want to feel as like excited to drive as I feel not safe, but like comfortable to drive. I don't necessarily think that I care to buy a V12, you know, Aventador or Revuelto because I want to feel comfortable. And so, you know, I think they did a good job with the view. I think they really killed it, really killed it in design. I think they did a really good job there. I think my biggest regret for this car, or where I hope Lamborghini will listen and maybe take a more raw driven approach to the SVJ instead, is maybe, just maybe, replacing all this buttons and modes and shit with something simpler like they used to have, where you had 3 choices. You either drive in a city, driving in sport, or going full balls out in Corsa. And that was basically it. And the car decided what changed for you as a result. And that, in my opinion, simplified all this and all that gauge shit and all these things this tells you that it doesn't do. I think we need less buttons and we need more driving. And so that's my opinion of the Lamborghini Revuelto. And it's a very good start for Lamborghini. I think it's a very good design language for Lamborghini. And I think it's a very usable, exciting, new modern platform. I really hope that what Lamborghini has done is make a drivable, usable Aventador in hopes of making a fucking bananas crazy SVJ variation down the road that doesn't involve all this shit that takes away from the driving, because this may be just the way they're separating their line. And I really hope that's what it is, but only time will tell. So there you have it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to know your thoughts on the Revuelto. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think this spec is amazing? Is it crazy? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Put it in the comments, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll catch you next time for Exotic Car Hacks.